Hello. Can you guys let me know if you can hear me okay before we start? Hey, awesome. Looks like you can hear me. So, what time is it? 9 o'clock. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna wait one more minute, and then we start. Okay. So let's get started. Welcome. Uh, this is the second Flask webcast. In case you haven't heard before, I'm trying to do a live event approximately once a month now. Uh, if you haven't seen the first one, you can find it on YouTube on my account, on this same account that you're watching this, and then you can watch it later if you're interested. Um, I'm trying to pick an interesting topic for each of these, and the topic for today is the application and request contexts, which are source of frustration and I guess weird errors for many of you. So I'm gonna try to uh, explain, what these are, why they give you errors, and basically help you understand what's going on so that you can avoid those errors. Um, Before I start, I'm going to give you a couple announcements and instructions to make the most out of this event. First of all, uh, to show my appreciation for you joining me here, I put the Flask Mega Tutorial book and videos on a pretty big discount. So if you want to order them today, then you're going to get them cheaper. And also for those of you that own the ebook, if you log in through your account at learn.miguelgreenberg.com, then you're also going to see a discounted upgrade if you are interested in getting the video version of the tutorial. So, okay, that's number one. Number two, there is a chat that's linked to this webcast. So if you look in the description of the YouTube video, you're gonna see a link to it. So if you want to chat with everybody else that's watching while I do this, then you can join the chat. Let me check. Yeah, there's only one person there. So yeah, I suggest that you join and get access to chat. Um, this is important because of two things. Number one, if you have questions for me, you have to put them in the chat, and I'm going to show you how in a second. There are specific instructions so that I get the questions. Number two is that no, there you go. Great. So number two is that if you are in the chat, you are going to be eligible to a couple giveaways. So one is going to be this book. I'm going to give away this book later after I'm done with the presentation portion of this. And then I'm also going to give away the Flask Mega Tutorial in electronic form, the ebook and the videos. So one of these and one of the other one. So for that you will need to be in the chat. Basically this little thing that I created to basically choose a winner is integrated with that chat. So okay, yeah, there's a few 5 or 6 people that joined. So I guess I'm going to repeat this later for those that missed this. Okay, let me. What's going on here? Hold on 1 second. I'm seeing notifications on my screen, and I want to make sure that I don't, for when I show my screen, I don't want to for them to be distracting. Yeah, I have a bunch of Chrome windows open that I didn't realize. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna clean up my. You can see that I'm not a pro at this. I apologize, but I'll sort this out really quickly. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So okay. Okay, people are joining. Good. So let's talk about the questions first. And I showed this the first time. So if you want to ask questions to the other people that are in the chat room, then just do it, and that you can freely chat with anybody else. But if you want to ask questions for me that I'm going to answer at the end of this event, then since I'm doing this, I'm not watching the chat. So I need you to do something a little bit special. So I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna show you. Let's see if you see my screen. And yeah, okay, so you can see my screen. Sorry if this looks like I'm waiting too much. The problem is that there's a like a 10-second delay from when I say something and when it basically you get it. So I'm watching on a second screen to make sure that I'm doing this right, and that's why I'm waiting. What you need, if you have a question, what you need to do is prepend your question with the word question and then a colon. So I'm gonna put one myself as a test, and then here in my screen you can see that this is where I am going to see your questions. So finger crossed. Let's hope that this works. So there you go. I posted a question, and magically I get it here. So if while I'm doing the presentation at any time, this is not going to interrupt me. So at any time you get a question, you can just go ahead and write it in the way I did in the chat with the prefix. If you don't put the prefix, it's not going to show up here in my list, and then I'm going to miss it. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to do the this thing, the giveaways, and then while I do that, you can come to this site. This is public, and you can connect, and then you can vote on the questions that you are more interested in me answering. And if there's time, I'm going to answer all of them, but I'm going to answer them in the order in which from the most voted first. If you want to see this site, this is webcast.miguelgreenberg.com. And this is, if you're interested, this is a little Flask and React application that I built in the first webcast. This was a little bit incomplete. I did a little bit more work on it this time around. At least now it's deployed on my domain. It wasn't last time. Anyway, I think that's it for introductions, and I'm gonna get started with the main topic, the contexts. So I don't know, for those of you that worked on say Django or many other frameworks, you're used to. I'm gonna open here a text editor. You're probably used to write route handlers or view functions or whatever you call them like this. It's def my view, and then here you have a request argument, and then here you do whatever you need to do, right? And if you need to do anything with sorry, I'm going to remove this. It's distracting. I'll go back to that. So if you need to do anything that requires information that was provided by the client in the request, then you use this request variable that you've got as an argument. And one of the problems with that approach is that if this view function calls another function, then if that other function needs elements from the request, you need to pass around this request variable or some of its attributes. So in Flask, Armin Ronacher, the creator, decided that wasn't ideal. There's also the situation where maybe this view does not need to do anything with this request variable, but you're forced to accept it, right? Regardless of if you need it or not. So Flask decided not to do that, and unfortunately, that the solution in Flask, while it's somehow a little bit more convenient, it's also kind of confusing. So I have here, I have here an example. This is a very super simple application. You can see that this is my view function. The view function doesn't take any arguments. It's just connected to the root URL of my application. And somehow I get to use this request variable that looks like a global variable, right? Though it's not a global variable declared here, it's actually imported from Flask. So this is the solution that you use with Flask. You import request or a bunch of others that I'm going to talk about later. And then you can just use them. They're there. So if you know a little bit of Python, then you start wondering how the hell does this work? How is it possible that this symbol that you import, it's really the request object. For example, what happens if this is a multi-threaded application and there are two requests coming in at the same time from different clients? So this function is running at the same time in two different threads, and both are referencing request. So what happens there? And what happens is that everything works. Each thread will get the correct request object. But yes, this adds a lot of confusion, and a lot of people don't understand how that works. So I'm going to try to uncover the mystery today. So the big problem with this approach in Flask is that people get errors, and I'm gonna demo. I'm sorry, I need to activate I have a virtual environment here. People experience errors, and these errors are very obscure, and nobody understands what's going on sometimes. So I'm gonna start a console, and if, for example, if I say from Flask import request, that works. There's no problem with that. And then if I try to do that same thing that I did in the example application, request args get, which, by the way, this is obtaining an item from the query string of the URL. So for example, if I were to connect to this application, I would say localhost 5000, and then I will say $name equals Miguel, right? And this args will be a dictionary of all these things that I put here in the query string. So if I say get name, I get the famous working outside of request context error, right? So this is one way in which people get this error. Now, when people think that there's a single error, there's actually two very similar errors. So this is one, working outside of the request context. And then the second one, just to demonstrate, I'm going to import one other thing from Flask. I'm going to import current app. And now I'm going to say current app config get, for example, secret key. Let's say we want to get a configuration item. So this is the second one, and here you can see this is request context and this is application context. So those are different. So let's see what's going on with this. Imagine that Flask is receives a request from a client, and now it needs to invoke your view function. So, for example, it needs to call this. So basically, what Flask does is it takes the information that the web browser provides, and it creates a request object. Then it assigns that request object to a request context, and this is this mysterious entity that allows this symbol to have the correct value. A request context is a structure that Flask maintains, and it maintains one request context per thread. So each thread will have a different request context. And then it puts the request object that it created for that request in the context. The context is basically it's a data structure. I mean, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how the request context is structured, but it's basically a list of objects. And when a new request arrives, Flask is going to put the request object for that request as the first element in that list, and then it's going to invoke your view function. And here, when you import this request symbol, you're not really importing a variable. This is not a variable. This is an object that some people call it a proxy object. This is an object that anytime you try to access an attribute, so when you say request dot anything, then the object finds a real object to send that attribute to. And this proxy object, when Flask invokes your view function, is connected to that request object that maps to the client request. Because each thread has a different request context structure, then each thread will get its own set of values and its own request object. And that's basically how Flask makes this work. I'm sure you still have a lot of questions. Let's check quickly. Well, okay, not so many. Feel free to ask questions. If I miss anything, I want to make sure that I cover it at the end. I bet this is still confusing, and hopefully, I hope you at least understand now a little bit better why, if I say in a Python console request.args, why, sorry, I need to import it. Why I get this error. And the problem here is that when I import request, this is the proxy object that is linked to the request context in this thread, right? So request.args basically activates that proxy. The proxy goes to see what's the request object that's stored in the request context for this thread. And of course, there's none of that here, right? We don't have, I'm not running an application, so there's no concept of receiving requests. So basically that's the error. Flask detects that I'm asking to get a request object out of a request context that doesn't exist, and then it puts out this error. And likewise, the same thing happens with the application context, though the application context is a little different, and I'm going to explain the differences in a little bit. So I hope now you understand why you get this error. So let me show you how Flask basically assigns or creates a request context before it invokes your view function. There are actually two ways to create request contexts. So the way that Flask uses it says with app being the Flask application, and then the application instance has this method called request context. And here you need to pass some information. And what Flask uses is this environ object. This is actually not an object. This is a dictionary. And this is a dictionary that the web server is going to provide to Flask or actually any WSGI application. And this dictionary contains all the data that came with the request. So Flask creates a request context using this request context method. It passes the dictionary, and then this request context method is going to use the data here to create a request object, and then it's going to put that request object in the request context for the current thread. And after that, then inside this with block, so this is a context manager. Inside this block, it's going to call your function, and then your function is going to be provisioned with the request context, so it can reference request, and everything is going to work. And if there's another thread that's doing the same thing at the same time, it's also going to work because the request contexts are per thread. They're separate. In each thread, there's a different one. So this is one way. I'm going to bet that many of you never heard of this, and I think it's fine because you will rarely do this in an application. And the reason why this isn't very useful is that you probably don't have access to an environment dictionary that's formatted according to the WSGI rules. The contents of this dictionary are very specific. They are part of a standard, and if you're interested and you want to find out more, there's a PEP that defines what this dictionary should contain, and it's PEP 3333. So you can look it up, and if you're interested, read about it. The second way in which you can create a request context, which I believe some of you may have seen before, is test request context. And then here you usually pass the path that you want the request to be. So if you want to create a fake request for the root URL of your application, then you do it like this. And this is also Context Manager. And this will create a request context. And inside you can reference request and other variables that I'm going to talk about later. And they're all going to work. So the problem is that I've seen many times, even in sometimes in Stack Overflow answers, that people recommend this when as a solution to this error. But the problem is that in a real application, this is not useful. This is making a fake request. It's not making a real request. The request that you make with this is not going to have any relation to your client, the client that sent the actual request. So this is limited. In my view, this is limited to unit tests, in which case it's fine to use fake clients. But in an application, I don't see anything useful by using this. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is that this one is not useful, and the other one, the request context, it's kinda difficult to use because you don't have your WSGI environment. So in other words, typically for the request context, you should let Flask handle it. And if you get this error specifically about the request context, I think more than likely this is a problem in your application. You will need to find why you are using anything that comes with a request when there's no request. So yeah, there we go. That will be my bet, is that your application needs to be corrected. Basically, not use request. To complete the discussion on the request context, there is another variable from Flask that is also dependent on the request context, is the session variable. So this is the user session from Flask import session. And this variable also it works in the same way, but the difference is that the request variable maps to a request object. Session maps to one attribute that's stored in the request object. So session is a high-level representation of something that's already in the request, and that is the session cookie. The request will have all the cookies, and among them there's going to be the user session cookie from Flask, and it will be totally fine if you do request.cookies and then find the session there and then handle it yourself. But session is a higher level view that basically allows you to work with the session as if it was a dictionary. So session it's basically a view of this session cookie that's stored in the request object. You will also get the same error if you try to access session and there is no request context. Another thing that you're probably familiar is the current user variable from the Flask login extension, and this is the same thing. So current user provides a high-level view of some information that's already in the request object. you can get the same information from the request object, but current user provides it in a more convenient way. And because it depends on the request object, it also depends on the request context. And it will also give you trouble if you use it outside of, when there's no request in the context. So that's request context. We also have the application context. And at some point long ago in some early releases of Flask, there was only one context, and all the important things were there. But then at some point, I believe it was Armin that decided that there are some things that you may need from the environment that, even though they're useful during the life of a request, they are not directly tied to the request. So I showed you all the examples that I showed you here. We have the request object, which is associated with the request variable, the session object, which is associated with the cookie, the session cookie in the request object, and current user, which is associated with the authentication information or the session cookie as well, actually, that comes with the request. So all these things need a request. If you need to know what your application, the application instance is, there's really nothing in the request that is needed to know what your application is. So this current app symbol doesn't really have any ties to the request, right? You can just you can just use it. Even if you have no request, in theory, you should be able to know what's your application. So the decision was made to separate the request context and then create a second context that is called the application context. So when Flask is getting ready to call your view function, let's go back to the code here. So it's going to do two things, not one. First, it's going to determine what's the application instance, and that once it knows the application instance, it's going to create an application context and install the application instance in it. So this is the same concept as with the request object and the request context, but it's done on a different structure. So each thread will have now two structures, one that holds the application context and one holds the request context. So it'll start by installing the application context. It's going to put the application instance in it. And this current app variable is linked to that application instance that's stored in the in the application context. So it installs the application context, and then it does the same thing with the request context. Basically, it takes the environment dictionary from the web browser with all the data from the client, and then it uses that request context method that I showed you before to create the request context. So now that the two request and application contexts are installed, then it invokes your view function, and then that gives you access not only to request, session, and current user, but also to current app and the G object, which is also this is another variable that you need during the life of the request, but it doesn't depend on anything that's in the request itself. So current app and the G object are both mapped to the application context. Now, I showed you how to create a request context in two ways, and then I told you that none of those two ways are probably useful to you. With the application context, the story is a little different. since there is no need to have request information for this context, it is a little easier for us to basically install an application context. So let's import current app. Let's see if I can import so this is example.py is the code that I just showed you, the little example. So I'm going to import app. Okay, so now I have my my application instance from that example. So if I wanted to create so hold on, first let's check. If I say current app, since there's no application context, current app.config it gives me an error, right? But app.config works, right? That makes sense, I hope. App is my application instance, which I know because I imported it explicitly. But if you are writing a piece of code where you need to make a reference to the application and you don't want the caller of that piece of code or function to have to send the application, typically you're going to use current app, because that's how Flask communicates to the view function what the application is. So what we can do here to make current app work is to say with app context, and here basically this app context method from the application instance is going to create an application context and install it on this thread. Once again, remember that this is thread specific. So when you do this, it's going to only work on the thread that you're doing it. And I'm going to talk about background threads next. So that's one of the sources of all these errors. So if now I say print current app.config, now it works. So current app inside this block is linked to the application instance, and that's the doing of this method. Sometimes it's inconvenient to use this with syntax, the context manager syntax, to do this. Another way that that Flask provides that sometimes it's a little bit more convenient, it's to store the context in a variable. So I created a context. This context is not active; it's only created. So it's in this variable right now. So if I say current app config, I still get an error because that context is not installed in the thread. So then to install it, I can say ctx push. And now I do have that context installed. When I'm done using it, I can say ctx pop. And now I'm back to not having current app linked. So I'm sure all of you have done at one point or another this trick of creating an application context to avoid the errors. And unfortunately, I'm going to bet that many of you did not understand what you were doing. You were just doing it because you found it on Stack Overflow or something like that. So let's talk about the threads. That's something that it's very common. I see a lot of questions about that in Stack Overflow. So let's say you have a view function, and as part of that view function, you need to start a background thread that does some work in the background. So basically, you don't want to hold the client on that request. You don't want that request to take a minute, for example. So you start a background thread that does that work that takes a minute, and then the request returns immediately, which is something very common. It's basically an HTTP asynchronous request. That's how some people call it. So the problem is that if in the background thread you try to access request or session or current user or current app or G, none of those are going to be available because it's a different thread. And as I mentioned, the contexts are associated with the thread in which they're created. So you have no way to have those contexts automatically set up for you in the context of the thread. So there are a few ways to avoid that. For example, for this we need to separate request and application context. In the case of the request context, what I prefer to do is to pass any data that the background thread needs as an argument into the thread. So let's go back to the code. So if I needed to start a thread here, then I could say thread target equal whatever. This will be the name of my thread, and then args. And here I can say request dot get dot name, for example. And so here I'm invoking the whatever function. This will be function here, and this function will take a name argument, for example, right? So here I'm accessing the request variable still while I'm in the original thread, the thread that was invoked, in which the view function was invoked. So I can access all of this and then pass the specific data that the thread needs as an argument. So that will be my preference. Another thing that you can do, which is kind of confusing, but anyway, it's available. So if you create your thread as an inner function, so you put this thread function inside your original function, then you can decorate this function with, and here I'm probably going to get the name wrong. It's a name. It's a long name. Copy. I think it's copy current request context or something like that. I'm sorry if I got this wrong. But anyway, there's a decorator from Flask. So you import this long thing from Flask. So this will add logic to your function that will make a copy of this request context. So basically, it will copy the values of request, current user, session, and along with that, the application context, all of it. Because I didn't mention this, but anytime there's a request context installed, there's also an application context. Excuse me. So the request context sort of depends on the application context, but the reverse is not true. You can have an application context installed with no request context, but when you have a request context, there's also an application context always installed. So this is basically, this is going to make a copy of that whole structure, the two contexts. And then if you do this, then here you can reference request or anything else. And then it will be an exact copy. It will not be the same, but it will be an exact copy of that request context that was active in the main thread of the view function. So these are the two ways that you can work around errors with the request context. For the application context, it's actually a lot easier because as long as you know what the application is, you can create an application context. And the problems that I see with the application context that most people trip with are when they use extensions. And an extension that a lot of times gives people problem is Flask mail. And I don't think most people understand what's going on, either with Flask mail, sometimes Flask SQL Alchemy as well. So the typical thing, let's talk about Flask mail, for example. basically you have a view function that needs to send an email, and sending an email it takes maybe 2-3 seconds, right? So you decide to put that in a background thread, exactly like I did here. So if you do it with this, then you'll find that everything is going to work. But if you don't know this, and basically you create a thread and then expect that when you say mail.send in the background thread that it's just going to work, you're going to get the error. And the reason for the error is not always clear. And that reason is that Flask Mail needs to know what's your mail server, because it needs to send your email. And how does it know what's your mail server? It needs to find it in the configuration. For Flask Mail, you do something like app config mail server, and here you set your SMTP, the whatever, right? Your mail host. So it's in the configuration object. So if you look at the Flask Mail source code, you're going to see that in the send function, at some point it does current app.config mail server, because it needs to know what this where to send the email, what server to use for this, and this is what causes the error, the current app. The access to current app when there's no application instance installed. I mentioned Flask SQL Alchemy, and that's exactly the same thing. If you need to write an object to the database, you're going to be doing something like, and again, this if you do it in the main view function, it's fine. But if you do it in a background thread, if you need to do so let's say this is a thread, and here I do the v session add user some object. So this is going to need to create a connection to the database. So this DB object it needs to know what the database is, and the database is, once again, in the configuration is app config. I think it's SQL Alchemy database URI, and here you say SQLite whatever, right? Let's say this is a memory database, like that. So it needs to find what the URL for your database is, because it needs to connect to it. So it's also going to do current app.config SQL Alchemy database URI, and that's going to give you the error if there's no application context. So how are we doing on questions? Okay, not a lot of them. We have. So I was hoping this would last an hour. It's probably going to go a little bit longer, I'm guessing. Apologize for that. The final thing, this is taking longer. I'm in a chatty mood today. The final thing that I wanted to mention, maybe some of you sometimes have done this, and maybe you created a background thread, and you tried to send the email and it worked. And now you're saying, I'm pretty sure when I did this, it worked. And yes, you're not crazy. Sometimes this works. So to help you understand, the whole thing and all the different aspects of this that makes it so complex, sometimes this works, and that's pretty interesting. So I'm gonna try to explain why. Let's clean this up a little bit. So let's say that we have a the whatever function that we used, and here we say current app. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Here we say mail send. So here you have your configuration. If you're initializing Flask Mail, here you're saying mail equals mail, and here you have two options. One option is to do it like this, right? This is the when your application is here in the global scope, you do it like this. And another way is when so I'm gonna refactor this quickly to work with a application factory. So the other way is when you have create app, and then you have it like this. You create the app as a local variable, so here there's no app. So you create mail as an empty with no arguments, and then here you complete the initialization by saying mail.init app. Here, when you know the app, you pass it, right? So there are two ways to initialize an extension. So the case where things fail is when you use this style, the style where you initialize the extension in two parts, where you create an object for the extension with no arguments, and then you complete the creation of the object by calling init app. So extensions that are initialized in this way, by definition, if you look at how to create extensions in the Flask documentation, you're told that when you initialize an extension in this way, the extension should not make an assumption of what the application is. So in other words, it's not allowed to keep this application instance as its own state. So it's forced to use current app to find what the application is. And the reason is that the assumption is that there could be multiple application instances in the same process, which is very rare but possible. So the extension should supposedly work with multiple applications, and that's how you achieve it, by not allowing the application to store a link to the application itself and using current app instead. And that's why, the extensions, when they're initialized in this way, they use the current app variable and give you the error. Now, if you do the other way, where you just initialize your application as a global variable, and then you initialize the extension by passing the application instance right here, up here, then when you initialize the extension in this mode, Flask allows the extension to keep a pointer to the application instance. And in that case, then many extensions opt to use their own link instead of using current app. And that's why when you initialize them up here globally in this way, then they work, and they don't give you the error for the context, because they don't really need a context when they're initialized in this way. So anyway, I hope I didn't give you a headache with all this. I hope it was useful, and be sure to let me know if this type of discussion is helpful or not, and if you get something out of it or not. If it's too technical or not too technical, please reach me any way you can, and let me know, because I want to make sure that what I do is useful. But I think I have a cheat sheet here. I think I've said everything I needed to say. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. And for those, if you missed this, if you look in the description of the video that you're watching, there's a link to a chat. You can join the chat, and then you can put your questions. And for your question to show up in my list, it needs to be you need to prepend it with question colon, and look up in the chat history how others have done it, and do the same thing. That's actually the only way the question is going to show up here, and because I'm doing this, I cannot read the chat, so I'm not going to find the questions unless you do it that way. If you connect to webcast.miguelgreenberg.com, you can see this, and you can vote on the questions if you want. It looks like there aren't that many. So I'm gonna get to all of them without problem. So the other thing that's important, if you're not in the chat, is that I'm gonna give away a book and a mega tutorial, like right now. And the way this is going to work is that you need to be in the chat, because I'm going to select randomly someone from the chat for these two giveaways. So let's see, how many people do we have? Yeah, we have a few. But if you're watching this and you want to have a chance to score a book or a tutorial, get on the chat right now. So let's see. So the way I'm gonna do the drawing for these things. Okay. So this is extremely low key and low tech. So this application that I'm using here, the one that shows the questions, I mentioned this in the beginning. This is a Flask application with a React front end. Basically, I'm going to. It's called Webcast Assistant. It's on GitHub, so you can see it. Full transparency. If you want to see how I did this, it's there. If you watch the first webcast, the one that I did a month ago, I showed the Flask side, and I basically explained how everything works on the Flask side. And that application is now, I open source it, and it's on my GitHub account if you're interested. So basically, I'm going to use it as a sort of a place where I can throw things that I need to support me in doing this, these webcasts. So one of the things that I added since last month is this thing to do a giveaway that I hope it works. And to do that, I need to send a request to this application. So I have here, I created the two requests that I need to send. One is going to be to raffle the Flask web development book, this guy here. And then the other is going to be to full access to the Flask mega tutorial, the ebook and the videos. So I hope it works. So I'm going to copy this request, and of course, if you try to send, of course, I'm the only one that can do this, right? You can send a request, but you don't know my token, so you will not be able to start a giveaway yourself. Only I can do. So I'm going to send a request for the Flask web development book. So whoever wins this, I'm going to mail this to you on Monday. So this is going to be the physical book. I'm going to send it by mail. So fingers crossed. Let's hope it works. The result is going to show up in the chat. It's going to look like a message that I wrote, but it's actually this thing writing it for me. So let's see. There you go. We have a winner. Niraj, I think. I hope I apologize if I didn't say your name correctly. But you need to contact me and give me your address. Okay. Yes. So please make sure you contact me. I would prefer if I hear from you, at least you acknowledge that you want this book now, because if you don't, then I can find another one. But anyway, I'll give you a few minutes to contact me, and if you don't, sorry, I'm gonna find someone else. Okay, the next one. So this is gonna be for full access to the Flask mega tutorial, ebook, and videos. Disclaimer. So this is now very sophisticated, as I said. So if by any chance the same person gets selected, I'm gonna just run it again until someone new gets it. I don't want the same person to get both. So here we go. Yeah, look at that. Okay, I bet there's a bug here. Ah, there we go. Okay. Well, I'm glad I made the disclaimer. M. Breslin, you... oh, there you go. Okay, so you get access to the mega tutorial. If you want to send me privately, if you want, your email address, after we're done with this, I'll hook you up and I'll give you access. I need to hear from you, Niraj, because if not, I'm going to give the book to someone else. Okay, going 1, 2, 3. Okay, fine. I'm gonna find someone else. So. Okay, Flask web development, take 2. I can't believe this. That's awesome. So I should mention this. So I'm a little bit suspicious about this. So let's make it interesting. So I welcome you to look at the code for this, and if you find a mistake, I will give you a book too. How about that? Because the full transparency, I did this, with the best intentions. But okay, I'm gonna do one more. Please, let's see. Okay, there we go. So Daniel, you there? So okay, there we go. Okay, you got the book. This is yours. So you need to send me your address, and then I'll mail it to you on Monday. Okay. How are we doing on time? 10 o'clock. Okay. So we don't have a lot of questions. So I'm going to sort this by votes, and I'm going to start. So how to divide the starting application file further so that we do not get circular import. Okay, so and this is no other than Niraj. So you're gone now, I think. This is very interesting that you ask this, because I haven't told anyone, but my the topic that I thought I was going to do next month was going to be circular imports. So I'm going to discuss this in detail, because a lot of people have problems with that. I was thinking all the things that make Flask difficult sometimes, and the contexts was the first that came to mind. But definitely, circular imports is a big thing. So I'm going to talk about that next time. Excuse me. The request seems to be a global variable object during all requests. Do you think using a global variable is a bad design? It's not a global variable, as I explained. Request is a proxy object that points to a to this global structure that's the request context. If I think global variables are a bad design, it's really. I mean, there's no black or white. It's gray. Sometimes you, I mean, specifically with Python, really there are very different levels of scope. When you put a variable in the global scope, it's not really a global variable. It's a module variable. It's not a variable that can be seen globally in the entire application, just in that module. So in that way, it's not really a global variable. And that's a very common practice that you do. I mean, if you have constants, for example, you put them as module variables. In the global scope, you can initialize your Flask application or your extensions in the global scope. I think it's something that if you abuse, then you end up with bad code. I definitely think that. But there are sometimes where it's justified, I think. More so if you have an application that it's not a single file, but a nice structure with packages and sub-packages, then declaring variables in the global scope of a module makes perfect sense to me, because it's scoped to that module. It's not a global variable in the in the wider sense where any place in the application can access that variable. Okay, next. Does a request object able to handle duplicate context like reload the browser? I'm a newbie. You don't need to apologize for that. So I'm not sure what you mean by duplicate context and what's the relationship with reloading. If you reload the browser, then Flask is going to get a new request, and it's going to create a new request object and a new request context. So I mean, it doesn't matter how fast you can refresh. Each time the browser contacts the web server for the page, then the whole thing is going to be done anew. It's going to be done all over again. And when a request ends, the context for that request is thrown away, basically. So each request creates new context, calls your function in the Python side, and then when you're done, the context is thrown away. So in Flask, a module import supersedes the global namespace of certain attributes. So request is... I'm not sure I understand this question. If you're asking specifically about request or current app, as I said, these are not... So request is not the request object. It's actually a proxy object. Actually, I mean, I know it's late, but this is something that I could clarify. So let's use from Flask import current app. So we have current app from example, and I import my application. Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up this, right? Let me clean this up. Okay, let's do it now. Okay, so we have app, and we have current app, which now it's not associated with the application instance. So if I do type app, this is an instance of class Flask. If I do type current app, it's a proxy. That's what I said before. So you're really working with an object. All the threads that import current app, they're seeing the same object. and it's not the application. In the case of request, it's not the request. It's a proxy object. These are special objects that use a little bit sort of magic to basically to act as intermediates between your application and an actual object, which will be the application or the request. So even if I say with app context, and here I say print current app, and then print type current app. So you see that if I print current app, the identity of this object, which is it's a local proxy, is basically hidden. The proxy sort of disguises itself as the real thing. But if you ask for the type, you get the truth that this is not really it's not really the app. So that's important that it's understood. You are using a proxy object, not the real object. In most cases, this is not a problem. Sometimes you have the proxy and you need to have the actual object. And if you need that, then what you can do is, and I should have shown this too, I can say current app dot get current object. And this is basically, you're telling the proxy, okay, give me the actual object that you're proxying. I don't want to see you acting as the real object. I want the real object. And that's how you do it. And sometimes you need to do this too. Sometimes the proxy object, there are very, very few cases where the proxy object is not able to completely fool some piece of code that it is the actual object that you're that you want, the application or the request. So you need to do this. Okay, next. How different is Django's MVC model from Flask's? And you're testing. Okay, yes, the test works. So I don't think I'm qualified to speak a lot about Django. Flask is not MVC though. There's this idea that MVC is the way everything should be, and I don't know, in my view, it isn't true. So if you wanted to map MVC, which for those that don't know, that means this means a model view controller. It's a very old pattern that originated as a way to create user interfaces. But these days, as I said, people want to use it everywhere, and also in web development. So in Flask, I would say the model is your data. So if you have a database and database models, that will be your model. That's easy to understand. You can say that the view are the templates, if you have templates in your application, and the controller is the part where things are a little bit not really that clear. You can say that the controller are the view functions. A lot of people say that, and I kind of disagree, because I worked with MVC in the old days when it was used to create user interfaces, and the controller is basically the module that takes input from the user, and there's no such thing here, right? A web application doesn't get input from the user. The user is miles away working with a web browser. So anyway, I think that mapping kind of works the same thing for Django. So in that sense, I don't see big differences. How do I ask a question? And someone voted it. Great. Okay. So Niraj showed up. Okay. Fine. I'm going to give away 2 books. So Niraj, don't worry. You need to send me your address as well as Daniel. Both are going to get books. That's fine. And you can contact me anywhere you want. You can send me a private message on the chat if you want, or You can tweet me, and then I can let you send me a direct message, whatever, however you want. It's fine. So next, if environ is sent from the browser and the request context uses the environ as an argument, then does Flask create a new request context with each browser request? Yes, absolutely. Yes, I mentioned this before. Each time the browsers, actually, it's not the browser. It could be the browser is one. It's one possible client. You saw me here when I did the giveaways. This is sending a request like the browser, but I'm doing it from the command line with this HTTP tool, which is called HTTP, by the way. It's also a Python utility. So there are many types of clients. The browser is just one of them. But yes, every time the browser or any other client send a request to the server, the web server, which will be this will be a GUnicorn, for example, or the Flask web development server, all those servers, they receive the request and they create this environ dictionary using a standard format that's in that PEP 3333 that I mentioned before. And then they pass this dictionary to Flask, and then Flask uses it to create the request object and the request context. And this happens every single time a request is received by the web server. That's correct. Next question. What happens when two request contexts are available and a request come in? Which context responds to the client? No, I think you got it wrong. The request contexts do not exist. They do not exist on their own. They are created as a response to a request that comes from a client. So when you start Flask, your Flask application, there's no request context and no request object. The moment the Flask web development server or GUnicorn or whatever server you use, the moment they receive a request, they create this dictionary, the environment dictionary, which, by the way, this is standard. So Django uses this, and Pyramid and Bottle and a bunch of other frameworks. They all use the same standard for the web browser to communicate. For the web server to communicate with the web application. So this is not Flask specific. So the web server creates this dictionary, passes it on to Flask, the web application, and then Flask creates a request object and a request context with the request object inside as a response to that request. Okay, and one more question. Can we just put individual Python files into single packages with an init py to avoid circular imports? I think it's more complicated than that. The way I'm going to cover this in more detail next time, I promise. But really, having I assume you mean a sub package, right? So you have your main application, and then you create sub packages like I do with my applications, and that's usually not enough. Typically, you have to move imports to the bottom to avoid circular requests. That's one of the tricks that you can use, and I'm going to show examples of that, and I'm also going to show examples of other things that you can do to avoid circular imports. But yes, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait about 1 month for that, because I really haven't prepared examples for that for today. Okay, one more. If you want to ask last minute questions, do it now, because after this, this is going to end. I'm a beginner. This was a very technical discussion. Is it possible for you to share some recommended reads? I would love to be more prepared next time, perhaps 2 weeks notification on Twitter on what topic will be covered. Yes, I think that's a good idea. So absolutely. So something that I can recommend that you watch the first webcast, the one that I did a month ago. That was not as technical. I showed well, actually there was a part that was very introductory, and then another part that was a little bit more technical. But there was something for beginners there as well. This one was definitely intended to be for people who have used Flask a bit and possibly have seen the errors that I started this presentation with. So yes, I try to advertise the topics better. That's actually good feedback. And recommended reads. Well, of course, I'm gonna toot my own horn. The Flask mega tutorial, which did I mention it's discounted. You can get it. But basically, it starts. In my view, it starts friendly for beginners. It doesn't stay at the beginner level all the way through the end. It increases in complexity, and I would say that the first half. So this is a tutorial that has 23 chapters. I would say that the first 11, 12, the first 12 chapters, you can probably follow by if you're a beginner. And then the second half has things that are a little bit more technical, and you will need some experience. But definitely the beginning is very friendly to it's friendly to beginners. If you're not sure and you want to see if the tutorial works for you, you can read it in my blog. In addition to me selling it and trying to support myself, by doing this, I sort of had the bad idea to also publish the tutorial for free on my blog. So you can go to my blog and start doing the tutorial, and you don't have to buy anything if that's what you want. Would you be able to make this happen more than once a month? I have so many questions about Flask inner workings being a Django dev. Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I'm thinking once a month is the best I can do. I think having a family, using a Saturday. This is Saturday morning for me in my time zone. So taking one Saturday morning away from my family a month, I think it's kind of reasonable, but more, I don't know. So maybe in the future, if I'm able to work less, if I became a millionaire selling books or whatever, and I could spend more time doing this, I will definitely be open to to do these more often. Maybe doing them during the week instead of Saturdays. Of course, I do it on Saturday because during the week I work. So anyway, yes, I'm open to this, to doing this more often, because I honestly enjoy doing this. So yes, definitely in the future, but not right now. I don't think I can do more than one a month. I should say that if you have ideas for topics for these events, do let me know, because I have a list that I made of 4 or 5 ideas, but I definitely want to hear what you guys want me to cover in these events. So anyway, I think that is all for today. Almost an hour and a half. So yeah. Please, if you want to support what I do, I think the best way, the best ways that you can do that is by either purchasing the tutorials that I sell, writing comments on Amazon.com, reviews for the things that you enjoyed. That actually helps a lot too, and costs you nothing. Having reviews is actually very important. That basically drives the search engine in Amazon, and more people will find my books. So if I can ask you to review my books, the ones that you've read, that would be very much appreciated. So yeah, that's not a question. Miguel, you're awesome. I appreciate you your all hard work, not just for the webinar, but all the preps you have already done. Look forward for the next webinar. Thank you, but that's not a question. Okay, so yes, I will try to announce the next one and the topic. You know the topic. The topic is going to be circular imports, but I'll announce the date more. With more time, so that you can prepare and plan for this. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next month. Or if you tweet me or anything, I'll always be happy to to answer to your questions. Thank you, and bye bye. See ya.